session. Before I sort of just go into it and hand over to our chair, Susan Kay from the Dunhill Medical Trust, I'd just like to thank Tunstall Healthcare for your support. This session wouldn't be possible at all without your involvement, and it's been great working with you in the lead up and indeed over many years. You're one of the original sponsors, so thank you. Can you please pass that on to Angus, to you and the team? But it gives me great pleasure now to invite Susan Kay, the Chief Exec of Dunhill Medical Trust, who's been, again, a long-term supporter of the LIN, to introduce this session. Over to you, Sue.
Oh, thanks, Jeremy. Well, hello from me, and you're all very welcome to this session, which is going to examine how new smart home and care technologies can drive better integrated solutions to support healthy living and aging well. As Jeremy said, I'm Sue Kay, and I'm the Chief Executive of the Dunhill Medical Trust. For those of you who might not know us, we're an independently endowed charitable foundation whose mission it is to fund and support the scientific research and the radical social change that we need for healthier older age. This time last year, we published our new strategic framework. And in preparing to do that, we revisited our original charitable objectives. These include, and you must forgive the archaic language of some of this, the furtherance of medical knowledge and research and the publications of the useful results thereof. But more importantly, research into the care of older people and the publication of the useful results and the provision of accommodation for older people. It's very interesting to see the thinking of the original trustees was very much aligned to the notion of every decision about care is a decision about housing, more of which later. So with this and our long-held principle of focusing on under-addressed and underfunded areas and themes, we set about ensuring that this was at the heart of our strategic framework, but very much set in today's context. We had observed that in recent years that we were getting an increasing number of research applications centred around advanced technology, but in many instances were very much about the technology and its capability, with scarce little thought for the people it's supposed to be helping or the people who need to use it to help those people. And then COVID brought those issues into very sharp focus, as well as the ever clearer matters of inequality and inconsistency of access and provision, both to technology and different forms of housing with care and support. All were matters that we've been discussing with our friends at HousingLIN for a while, and so together we decided to do something about it. So at the end of October, a really important report was published, and I've got a selection of people here with me today who were very much involved in producing it. It represents the better part of a year's work in which our friends at the HousingLIN, who we'll be hearing from shortly, using their rich experience of developing the happy principles, and as Jeremy said earlier, it's Happy Awareness Week. So if you don't know what I'm talking about, then you should look up the happy principles. So we used that sort of process and gathered an impressively broad and diverse range of witnesses and experts to come together to examine current practice and set out the future direction for the use of technology in housing and care contexts. The aim was to create practical and useful principles for what good looks like in using technology to make life better and more fulfilling for all of us as we age. The report was particularly timely, as last week we saw the publication of the long-awaited Adult Social Care Reform White Paper, rather refreshingly I thought, named People at the Heart of Care. It's no accident that it includes a specific section on housing, technology and new models of care, because so many of our fabulous happy witnesses and participants in the inquiry, and indeed those involved in creating and delivering another piece of work we've supported, led by the Social Care Institute for Excellence, that was called the Commission on the Role of Housing in the Future of Care and Support, have gone above and beyond to make sure that it was. It's great to see that one of the sections is headed "Every decision about care is a decision about housing." So People at the Heart of Care commits at least £150 million of additional funding over the next 3 years to unlock the potential of care tech innovation that enables preventative care and independent living. With this funding, it says, it wants to launch a new scheme to test ideas, scale those where there's proven benefit, and build the case for change. Fine and welcome aspirations, no doubt, but of course the proof of the pudding will be in the delivery. Core to that, we would argue, is that currently we have no universally understood definition or consistently understood concept of what good looks like in tech-enabled support. For those of you who are at the TAPI launch or who have read the report, central to it are 10 principles to consider when creating tech-enabled services. And as an aside, you won't see a tech-related word amongst them. So they're adaptable, co-produced, quality-focused, cost-effective, choice-led, interoperable, inclusive, outcome-focused, preventative, and above all, person-centred. The white paper goes on to say that the government aspires to use the full potential of technology to support people's lives and aspirations. But in terms of the TAPI principles, we'd say that services need to be adaptable, co-produced, choice-led, inclusive, and outcome-focused. It also seeks to build a system that can develop and adopt new ways of providing care and support to people at scale. But in terms of the TAPI principles, we'd say that services need to be quality-focused, interoperable, and cost-effective. And there must be a focus on prevention and health promotion to support people to live healthier lives for longer. But in terms of the TAPI principles, we'd say that services should be person-centred and preventative. So what we've recommended in this first report from the TAPI inquiry is a set of principles to be adopted, tested and refined by a whole range of folk involved in developing and delivering tech-enabled services. And I'm going to be coming back to talk about what happens next, but let's hear from our panellists who are going to be telling us about their perspectives, both on the issues raised in the TAPI report, the white paper, and their experiences of participating in the TAPI inquiry. First of all, we've got Vic Rayner. Vic is Chief Executive of the National Care Forum and is a passionate advocate for the delivery of high quality, person-centred care, and has got extensive knowledge and expertise across a wide range of care, support, housing and social policy agendas. Vic's going to be setting out the backdrop and the context for change. Vic.
Thank you very much. I am just going to share my screen, so if that's all right, very quickly. And hoping that's possible for everyone to see. Yeah, great. Okay, so I'm going to thank you very much, and it's really great to be here, and it feels like a sort of opportunity to reunite with lots of people that spent many years talking to about particularly about housing, but also about how care can go forward with technology in its sites, never mind insights. So that it feels like a good moment to be having some of this discussion. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to set a little bit of the scene, as you say, particularly around the care sector, a little bit about the white paper, and then a little bit about what part of the future might hold and gaps and a little insight into the customer of the future element as well. So where have we come from? Well, I'm particularly talking about care in this context. I think my experience in the housing world is that there was the housing world had come slightly further forward in relation to some of these agendas than care had. And when I joined the National Care Forum just over 5 years ago, I found a kind of world where there was this was my impression. Others may have a different perspective, but this was where I felt we were at. There was very limited use of digital across social care. There were absolute pockets of innovation and people who had invested, but actually generally as a whole, as a kind of policy decision, as an understanding of the implications of digital within social care, there was very limited use and pretty limited understanding. As a result of that, in a way, there was a very immature market, both in terms of those who might purchase or procure technology, but also in terms of those who might supply it. There was no kind of clear pathway, so very difficult for those who wanted to deliver within that market, that software market and equipment market, to understand what the future might look like, and that level of immaturity, meaning there was limited choice and adaptability and everything that goes with that. That meant there were quite a few people in the space who were building their own technology and digital responses to things, which was meaning that many of the opportunities that you start to outline in those TAPI principles were really not available outside of individual organisations. Lot of low level of understanding around data, so data literacy was very poor, mostly because people saw didn't see the large and vast amounts of kind of written information about people as data. They saw that as kind of planning or records in a way, so they didn't understand the potential data that was there, and those organisations that had digitised record keeping particularly didn't then see the opportunities that that might bring forward in terms of putting a picture together of what social care delivered. The skill set of the workforce was not recognised. The things that people needed to be able to do differently weren't being identified clearly, and there wasn't a sort of outline of a skills agenda in order to upskill that workforce and to recognise the things that people could and should be able to deliver. And there was a huge amount of caution and concern, and I think that perhaps not so much in the context of record keeping, although there were concerns about people having access to kind of digital records and that taking away from the notion of frontline care, but a huge amount of concern about what innovation might bring and whether innovation in relation to tech might take the care away from people. So lots of anxiety about, you know, robots and automation in that kind of way, and people seeing that as a real kind of affront to the ideology of care and the way in which care could be delivered. So that's you know, a snapshot, and there were loads of different, you know, you could pick out people within the sector who were doing very different things and pushing ahead and embracing it. But as an overall, I think it was out of many people's sight and grasp, and certainly out of the policymakers' purview as an opportunity. So we've been on a bit of a journey, as has you know, much of the world in a sense, but the social care sector has absolutely been on a journey around digital. Some of the kind of key milestones, and there's been lots of them, and I'll just highlight a few as we go along. One of the things I want to mention is something called digital social care that came into was sort of born about 4 years ago. It's a project the National Care Forum were very involved in the development of. It's a partnership project which is really trying to get a sort of sense of social care, you know, giving social care providers information about what tech might do, what it might deliver, how it might change services, but put together by social care providers. Because what we were finding is where there were opportunities that were being raised, like, for example, NHS Mail, that I'll go on to talk about, that kind of secure email system or access to the spine, those sort of things were being talked about and referenced in very, very NHS terms, which made them very inaccessible to social care, information governance toolkits, etc., etc. So there was a drive to bring some of that back into ownership by social care itself, and digital social care was born out of that, and it's been a hugely important part, I think, of certainly from a provider perspective, organisations feeling that they're comfortable with taking on board some tech. And many of the people that you've got here, Alison and others who are going to speak later, have all been part of that journey around helping develop the digital social care opportunity. Obviously, COVID has been a huge digital accelerator for the sector. It's often cited as one of the kind of positive things that you could say about the last 18-20 months. Data absolutely has come into the fore, both from the point of view of individual organisations using data to quality manage across sites where physical access was no longer possible. So organisations who wanted to be able to look at quality metrics, look at data from services, seeing immediately the need to bring together that under a digital system, and then being able to access that. And of course, central government and local government almost within a couple of months realising that they really had very little grasp of the picture within social care, whether that was about individual residents within care homes or people receiving home care in the community, whether that was about the workforce, whether that was about access to PPE. There was a huge raft of things that it became immediately vital for the government to understand about, and local government to be able to support and help with. So that approach to data, and that's encapsulated in Capacity Tracker, if people know about that, has really changed the dial. And then, of course, there was a rapid adoption of a variety of different pieces of technology in order to, again, overcome barriers where people weren't able to physically see each other face to face. So video conferencing for healthcare, communication and connection with relatives and friends and carers for people who couldn't, who weren't able to be face to face. And of course, records being transferred between health and care systems. Secure email came into its own. There was a sort of armistice in terms of information governance requirements, which enabled lots and lots of organisations to have access to secure email, NHS mail in this context, and a real focus on information governance processes and cybersecurity, and the introduction of various programmes, including the Better Security, Better Care programme, and then some hardware rollouts, so some iPad rollouts, which again brought NHS mail and various things such as video conferencing to services that weren't able to access them themselves. And if you talk to software suppliers, my guess is that they've had the busiest 20 months of their life, because they've been out bringing on board huge numbers of organisations who have taken forward care planning software particularly, but also rostering and all sorts of things which enable people to manage constantly changing systems. Within all that, there's been a little bit of a focus on skills, but a very low level focus on skills, and that's something we'll perhaps come back to. Bits and pockets of research have also helped build up this picture. So we've had a number of focuses on digital readiness, some of that managed by Digital Social Care and Skills for Care. There's been some focus on user research in relation to joining up care, and also Digital Social Care managed a helpline, or manages a helpline, which then, so we captured some information about how quickly technology could be taken up within systems. So some good kind of academic background research that's in there. We put forward a project called Hubble, which brought digital innovation together. And I noticed Johnny Johnson's one of your sponsors, and Johnny Johnson were very involved in this Hubble project, which brought together 3 different kind of types of organisation and helped people see the digital journey that they were going on. So we were able to showcase all of this digital innovation through virtual hubs. And if you haven't had a chance to look at it, I would really encourage people to go and look, because it doesn't just talk about the tech, it talks about the journey, and it talks about the leadership requirements and so forth, which are all vital elements of it. So what next? And again, apologies, I've missed giant chunks of the journey, but you'll all be able to fill those in yourselves, I've no doubt. So what next? Well, you're absolutely right. So we've had the white paper come along. People at the Heart of Care was announced last week. So that does represent, I think, a huge step forward in terms of an understanding of the role that technology can play within care. And usefully, it has some funding attached to it and some recognition of kind of infrastructure changes that need to be in there. People who've met me before will be unsurprised to know that I don't think there's enough money in there, but there is money in there, and I think there are some kind of clear objectives that are part of that, which will be useful to explore in this discussion. So one of those is about rationalization of data collection. And there's quite a bold ambition based on where we are now, I think, to come up with a minimum data set for care by April 2022. And there's various other bits of work that are going on around that. There's the Datcha project, which is looking at care home data, and there's obviously Capacity Tracker has been looking at sort of key elements of data, but an idea that we will have a minimum data set, and we won't be, care won't be answerable to all sorts of different requirements in that. That 80% of providers by 2024 will have access to shared care records, and in order to do that, that sits behind that is a story of information governance take up, so compliance with something called the Data Security and Protection Toolkit. So 80% of people being compliant with that to standards met level in order to get access to this shared care record, which is a shared record between health and social care. Huge step forward in that context. Broadband upgrade, so recognising that if you don't get the architecture right, it's impossible for people to capitalise on these opportunities, and home care definitely being a part of that as well. And integration being an important part of the government's agenda going forward. Cybersecurity is a critical element of that. So again, understanding what needs to be in place, and some work again around training with focus on digital skills and leadership. So some interesting things in there, and I think absolutely, you know, the result of the journey and a lot of work by many of you here, I'm sure, in terms of getting a kind of clear picture of what digital can deliver in relation to care. Integrated care systems are coming along. There's some kind of early piloting going on around that, which is pulling together some of these very useful kind of things that are developing now as the software market develops. So accredited supplier list, there's a whole range of masterclasses on there, lots of templates, and the helpline. So ICS is going to be critical. I think it's going to be possibly one of the real opportunities for ICSs in their early stages to look at digital programs across health and care. I'm looking forward to Roy's section because I want to hear more about the TAPI principles, but interestingly, coming along in parallel, perhaps with the language needing a bit more work, some clear principles around how digital technology should be developed. This is with the Care and Software Providers Association and Digital Social Care, who are kind of laying down some markers for how care technology should be delivered. I think there are probably some great similarities there, but this is all very helpful because it starts to be really clear about what new developments should look like, and absolutely that it should have a focus on the person receiving care. So where are we in terms of what is missing? I've got a minute left, so I'll rush it. I think absolutely having people rather than at the heart of care, at the heart of that change going forward. There hasn't felt like there's been a huge amount of co-production in development and delivery, and I notice that's one of the core TAPI principles. So getting to that point where really people who are using care and support services are much more involved in the development, delivery and design of solutions. The market itself needs to accelerate much more quickly. So we have a sort of growing in maturity market, but if you look at something like the there is a DPS, a chance, a direct purchasing system, to look at kind of key providers in the locality, and at the moment there's only 4 or 5 on there, so there's a lot more work to be done to create a kind of vibrant market. We need a lot more skills acceleration. There's work going on around digital leadership and digital champions, but actually we've got 1.6 million within the workforce. We've got a long way to go to make sure that everybody has even those basic skills around cyber and IG cemented into their DNA in the same way safeguarding is, for example. And we need that clear vision and the funding, as I say, for transforming care. It's starting to emerge within the white paper, but needs more. And we need to make sure the workforce is properly supported. And I think the bit that isn't properly connected yet, and this is why it's exciting to have this conversation here, is that I think what's going on in the housing world, looking at the built environment and the opportunities for smart homes and smart tech, is not coming through into the residential social care market in a way that it could, because I think we're still very much stuck in a narrative which talks about if people are living within residential care, that it's people who deliver the care, not really accompanied by tech, and we've got a lot of shift about that. And just the opportunity there, that it is very much some customer research that we did. So the opportunities that there is about the customer of the future. As we know, lots of people don't think about care going forward, but what our research showed us, and again, this won't be a surprise, I'm sure, to lots of the audience, is that people who are thinking ahead about their care are absolutely comfortable with technology being a real part of that in the future. And out of the top 12 options of care that people want technology to help and support them in their own home. That is the thing that people want most of all, outside of a whole range of other very much more perhaps familiar models of care delivery, including care homes right right down that list of what people want from their future. So tech being part of care, absolutely, absolutely critical. We've been on a journey, we've got quite a way to go, but it feels very exciting, and it feels that we've got a lot of the core elements of the architecture beginning to emerge in a much clearer picture.
Thanks, Vic. Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. There seems to be a lot of energy around at the moment. And I agree as well. I mean, I mentioned the 150 million of new funding. It's nowhere near enough, but it's a start, and let's make sure it's well spent. We had a quick question that's come in there, actually. Is the 150 million new funding coming from the social care levy? I'm not sure we actually know what the source is, but I would say probably, isn't it?
That's the description. Is it's in the 1.7 billion, which is absolutely the levy money, and it is described as new money in that sense. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Thanks. I'm going to move on. Just we're going to have time for questions and answers at the end. So just to keep things moving, and just as a bit of a heads up, Sally has put some really helpful links in the chat. The link to the TAPI report, and also a link to the Johnny Johnson Spey House project. So there's some more information about that on the HousingLIN website. Anyway, that's all nicely teed us up for Roy's session. Roy very recently chaired our TAPI panel. Until September 2017, Roy was director of the National Innovation Centre for Ageing at Newcastle University. He sits on the advisory board for the APPG for longevity and is a board member of the Technology Services Association. And we're going to be hearing from Alison from the TSA a little bit later. But in the meantime, to tell us all about TAPI, over to you, Roy.
Unmute. There we go. Right. Can you hear me? Just nod if you can hear me. Good. Great. Well, no pressure there then, Sue. And in fact, you know, you're right. I was involved with the university at Newcastle in the context of the National Innovation Centre for Ageing. And yes, I am on the TSA. But in fact, my history is predominantly in a multinational consumer goods company, where I spent 31 years. And so what I'm going to ask everybody to recognize is that the perspective that I'm going to give with respect to the issues that we're facing in the context of technology for our aging population, these are perspectives which are colored hugely by that history. And what I'm going to challenge you on is to expect that my perspectives may not be exactly the same as the perspectives of experts and people who are fully embedded in the context of technology and housing, or indeed managing the needs and the opportunities for engagement of older people. I'll take you through a few charts, and I definitely will, Vic, deal with the principles, the TAPI principles. First of all, let me say thanks to Jeremy for inviting me to speak this afternoon, and of course to Sue and Dunhill for allowing me to chair a panel of real experts. It was a wonderful panel. I learned a lot. They made my job easy. It was 6 months of frankly, maturing of understanding on my part with respect to the issues that exist for the aging population. And I listened hard to some of the insights that I got from those experts. I have a personal need, of course, because my mother is 93, I'm 67. You could argue that we're both in that older community, despite the fact that our needs are completely different. Anyway, what I'm going to do is suggest that you read the report. I am not going to go through the report now. Read the report. It's got lots of principles outlined. It's got fantastic case studies in there, and there are some recommendations. But now what I want to do is give you some personal perspectives. And I'm going to tell you right up front that I'm going to follow the way that a hero of mine, actually, Harvey Milk, used to get up on his soapbox and used to say, "My name is Harvey Milk, and I'm here to recruit you." And honestly, I'm here to recruit you. I'm here to recruit you to the use of the principles that are outlined in the TAPI report, because I think we, as a community can all gain from that, irrespective of big policy. And I'll explain a little bit more about what I mean later on. Right, these, by the way, are commentaries from the head and the heart. I believe in using both. And as I say, they're based on insights that I've obtained over the last 6 months. Right, I'm going to give you, now, how do I, let me just get, oh, right, good, it's working. Right, TAPI, what was it all about? Well, this was the stated objective. In my terms, what we were looking for here to establish how we could match what's needed with what's possible for the use of technology in care and particularly care for the elderly population. This concept of matching what's needed with what's possible is a very simple innovation concept, but it's one which I've used a lot over many years, simply because it boils down the objectives that we all have. If we can identify what we need very, very sharply, then very often we can make sure that what we deliver is the right thing. If you don't establish the needs really well, then you can never establish a really effective solution. Now, that's what TAPI was about. And of course, these were the TAPI mechanics. There were 4 hearings, 4 regional sector events, there was a consultation, and indeed we had some significant input from the international community where there is fantastic best practice. In fact, I'm just going to suggest to you all that if someone asks you about best practice, then it's not best practice from just along the road, and it's not best practice from the rest of the nation, but it's the best practice that exists globally. If we can embrace best practice that's existing across the world, then that might help us to shortcut some of the big ways in which we can use technology in our environments. And of course, we're linked with other commissions, other reports, and indeed, I'm going to mention the white paper in a few minutes. It was a fantastic group of panelists and wonderful expert witnesses, all of whom brought a great deal to this program. My personal perspectives, I usually try to have a letter, and I tried C to start with, which was all about consumer and customer and client and collaboration, and all. It didn't work. So I've done P, and P is going to refer in this case to people, processes, and principles. And I'll very briefly deal with each of those. We've been saying that people are at the heart of care technology interventions. That's true. But I want to highlight what that really means in practice. You see, I used to work in a company where we used to get very large groups of people to buy one thing. But the problem with the older population is that by nature, life brings heterogeneity. What we're not a homogeneous group. We might have some fundamental needs at heart, but we're all very different. Now, our problem is that uncovering individual needs takes skill, time, and effort. Now, I'm going to read you something that's in the white paper, and it says, the starting point for our vision is embedding personalized care. Now, it's pretty easy to write that down, but the implications of that are very, very profound, because in order to get to personalized care, you've got to talk to the person and you've got to listen to the person, and you've got to do that over time. It doesn't come easy. Now, what that means is it means you need a lot of time. You probably need a lot of resource, and you certainly need listening and development skills. All of those things, if we can put them together, it'll work. If we can't, that statement, the starting point for our vision is we'll never embed personalized care. Now, in that context, we're not an easily defined consumer group. And the sooner people realize we're not that, the better it will be. Now, I'm not saying that we're not going to get there. We are, because already the white paper is actually speaking to that. Once you recognize a problem, you're halfway to solving the problem. But in this case, that time, skill, resource is going to take a lot of developing, in my opinion, mainly because people are busy. Some of the things that we heard were absolutely fantastic. You know, technology isn't an end in itself, it's an enabler to life. What people just want is something that makes their life better. Things need to be integrated together. Interoperability is absolutely crucial. I know Alison will talk a bit about that later. Design, and choice. As you get older, you don't stop thinking about nice things. And in my opinion, the more designers we get involved in tech for housing and tech for application for care, the better it will be. Get the designers in, get the product designers in, get the service designers in, and get them to do great stuff. And then finally, of course, don't underestimate the older population. A lot of people, they certainly need skills. There's no question digital skills are vital, but they can learn. And many people already during COVID have learned how to use a whole variety of different digital and technical systems. Why not? Now, when I got involved in this, I already realized that it's a complex ecosystem for care and for health, but I didn't quite realize how complicated it is. And the problem is that there isn't a coherence to this, which is one that I would be used to in, for example, even a massive multinational. At least in a multinational, you might have complicated activities, but you tend to have non-complex structures. And one problem for us in this context is convening for success isn't easy. We don't have a simple platform or a simple framework. We don't have truly strategic convening across the multiple stakeholders. There isn't a community of practice. And Vic, by the way, is identifying routes by which we're getting there. But we don't have a good community of practice, and there's no easy market. Well, if we can crack those last two, then we'll be on a winner. And I actually think we would be able to do that. Now, I'm optimistic. There are already some wonderful consumer-centric initiatives around. My next few charts just identify some of these. The Smart Housing Initiative in Cardiff, the Blackwood stuff in Scotland, the Igloo stuff in Sunderland, the Future Home stuff in Newcastle, Digital Fight Club, where, basically rethink convening for discussion among senior leaders of needs of older people, and the Hubble project that Vic's already mentioned. By the way, in the report, the TAPI report, there are more and more case studies that are worth taking a look at, worth reflecting on, worth reapplying where you can. So I'm optimistic. Now, I just want to finish with a point, and that is, it's very easy to wait for big policy. And there are white papers coming out right now. But policy is top down. In my opinion, cultural change can happen bottom up and in the operation, whatever the operation might be, wherever you sit in the context of care and its application. And it was with that thought in mind that the 10 TAPI principles were written down, because it's Roy Sandbach's hope that every care conversation that takes place, wherever it might be, the 10 principles should be on the table. They bring the user into the room. They bring consideration of all aspects of putting technology and problems and opportunities together into the room. And if we can do that at the operational level, then we will not have to wait for big policy to drive this. Sure, big policy can drive, it can sort of open up the system to allow practical resource to be given to the things I mentioned earlier, all those aspects of people-centric developments. But already if we can apply the principles which are on the next chart, then we'll be already, even the people who are on this call, will already be penetrating the issues of technology interventions for people being applied across the board. So these are the 10 principles that that Sue identified. Now, just imagine you go into your meeting or into your Zoom call, in whichever context, whether it's to do with occupational therapy, whether it's to do with housing, new housing, or retrofit of housing, whether it's to do with telecare and other things. And you ask yourself the question, are we thinking about all these things? Anybody can ask that question, so long as you just take a look at them all and say, yep, we're considering this, or maybe we should think about this a little bit more. Are we truly person-centric? What is the outcome we're expecting, and how will we measure it? Are we being inclusive? And is everything that we're doing interoperable? These principles should sit on the desks of everybody who works in the context of care for the elderly population. And in meetings, they should be on the table. And that, frankly, is about all we're asking at this point from the TAPI inquiry and all of that work that the panel put in. You can access the report there. Obviously, Jeremy and his colleagues will be driving this ahead together with all of us. I think we're all enrolled. I know all the panel and the expert witnesses are enrolled. I'm counting on the however many people are on the call to be enrolled too. And thank you very much indeed for listening to me.
Oh, thanks, Rory. I think that was a great perspective on the TAPI report, very much with people at the centre of it. Getting a number of comments in already, which was absolutely central to our thinking about the fact that, and Roy touched on it as well, that older people are not a homogenous group. You know, if you consider people aged 60 plus, you've got at least 2 generations in there. So yeah.
Yeah.
So, as I said, really helpful overview. It was a hugely rich and extensive piece of work. But I want to move on now to hear from Alison Scarfield. She's a passionate advocate, has been a fantastic cheerleader all along, and we hope will continue to be so for TAPI. She's got a huge amount of experience in integrating health, housing and care, currently leads the Tech Services Association. So without further ado, over to you, Alison.
Thank you very much, Sue. And the speakers this afternoon's really set the scene about how are we going to unlock personalised outcomes enabled by technology. So just give me a little bit background of who I am. I do have a housing background. 8 years ago, I led all the technology-enabled care, telecare services here in Newcastle, but also I led the housing build for supported housing. As we built new purpose-built extra care schemes, as we built new purpose accommodations for learning disabilities. But one thing that really stuck in my mind, we used to do the build, the nice shiny door, making it purpose-built, but we didn't focus on the bespoke services that would keep someone at home of their choosing for the end of their life, as long as they wanted to live there. And what I do recall at the time is my CEO said to me, Alison, your vision is ahead of the time. That stuck with me for so long. I've had the tenacity to keep going and really driving the technology-enabled care sector. But this is not about technology. It's about better outcomes for people. And I recall at the first conference we had 8 years ago, as I stood up to the tech sector and said to them, our call to action has to be, and we played Emily Sandé, I recall it, throughout the entire conference, we need the voice to change a nation. And oh, here we are 8 years later with a pandemic that's truly changed us as people, in our private lives and our professional lives. So let's move on to the next slide and give some context. For many years, we've debated the what, the why, but today we're going to talk about the how. How we're going to take those white papers, those strategies into implementation and delivery. And so who are we? We're the national body for technology-enabled care services, and we're supporting over 1.8 million service users across the UK. That's through industry, our suppliers, but more predominantly the UK service delivery of all of the services such as sheltered housing, telecare, etc. Our mission is to drive transformation, and we're doing it. I've loved being a part of TAPI, but what we need to do is raise those standards, those safety, and drive continuous improvement. So just quickly, let's have a look before I move into implementation, what are priorities as a national body? So our first priority is to be the voice of care, to lead housing, care, health, enhance their understanding and development and adoption of technology-enabled care services, but see that central piece, being knowledge central, being the trusted source of knowledge for those working in the sectors of health, housing and social care. And finally, setting and maintaining standards as we've just talked about. I want to now talk about a major piece of work which happened in September 2020, just before we embarked on our work with the Housing TAPI and the HousingLIN. And in September 2020, we worked with key individuals on the Commission, exploring how technology-enabled care could truly integrate into adult social care. The Commission involved representation from social care directors, frontline care professionals, leaders across local government, health industry, but most importantly for today, it had a strong housing feel to it. And what does it play? Housing plays a pivotal role in prevention and well-being, and the vital role of housing plays in supporting communities and avoiding escalation into more formal care and health settings. But most importantly, this work involved people, individuals, families who access health, housing and social care services. So we have a really strong vision, and you're going to see some real alignments of what we heard about the TAPI principles. So adult social care needs to be shaped around individuals. There it is again, the co-production involving people whose lives it will change if we get this right. It was remarkable how the key findings of the programme aligned with the TSA work during COVID. Firstly, the bottom-up approach, as Roy's just described, we were supported by the Department of Health and Social Care to avoid the disruption to the 1.8 million people and provide technical and operational support to the sector. Then we moved on to look at the proactive and preventive service models that were forming during COVID. There was some fabulous services forming where they were coming together in communities with some of those community assets, delivering technology-enabled care and avoiding that escalation into social care. But then we published the Commission findings from the social care, and this led lovely into the narrative and how we explored the happy principles and the work on the inquiry. If we look at the recommendations, you'll start to see there's so much alignment. Firstly, technology-enabled care needs to be proactive, not simply reactive, waiting for the incident or the disaster to happen, and services must be co-produced with people. That's so aligned to the white paper, to what we're talking about today. But if that really happens effectively, we need to ensure we focus on infrastructure and skills. Now, infrastructure is not just technology. It is the infrastructure of people. And it's not only digital skills, it's not only leadership, it's culture. And how do we change that mindset for our health, housing and social care colleagues out there now, trying to meet that crazy demand and delivering a new model of care? And thirdly, if we get those key planks right, people must own the data. The white paper states that by 2024, everyone must own their social care data. Let's make sure that it's not just the social care data we're connecting. It's people data. It's the data from the technology. It's housing data, because this is prevention at its best. But finally, this can't happen unless we collaboratively work together across health, housing and social care and deliver real strong outcomes for people in our communities. And this work also aligned 30 different adjacent COVID response to care tech. The programs and our partners, ADAS and LGA, were really keen not to repeat and duplicate any of these work programs, and we're being really conscious in the TAPI building that we build on the successes of these programs and we start embedding them into a housing model. So in summary, what our analysis told us was in fact that to date, in social care, in housing, in health, we have seen no scale. We've seen pockets of absolutely amazing best practice of personalised care services where proactive and preventative solutions were being underpinned by smart technology. And they were keeping people safe and happy, meeting their needs, but also meeting their wants. So now I would like to share the how. We took all our learning pre-COVID and during COVID to start and articulate what a model of personalisation could look like, a transformation programme. Our works continued over the summer with our partners, collating the wonderful case studies behind the examples, the stories of a new care model, a common structure for the effective delivery of preventative and proactive services. But you'll see along the top of the arrows that this is a progression of need. As we see someone with dementia, is their disease and their needs progress, we tend to move them to the right side of that diagram. But what we need to do, enabled by technology and new bespoke services in housing, is enhance, prevent and enable, and putting people at the heart of everything we do. Delivering outcomes that meet their needs and their wants, and living a longer and happier life as they age. All the key things that we've heard within TAPI. But most importantly, if this is going to be successful, we need to look at the services wrap around the individuals that are coordinated, connected, and co-produced. This cannot be in a silo of housing. It cannot be in a silo of social care, and it certainly cannot be in a silo of health. What we see is an individual, and we need to see those individuals, and the professionals need to connect, coordinate, and deliver those bespoke outcomes. What's really compelling is the enablers at the bottom of this diagram, where we've seen all of the best practice during COVID, where they truly were delivering outcomes for people in the communities. They delivered a strong foundation of enablers. So starting with the people, partnerships, vision and leadership, empowering citizens, good commissioning, quality standards, ensuring quality, safety and improvement is vital. But there you go, interoperability, making sure that we're supporting integration of technology and people. But finally, on the right-hand corner, and I'm going to circulate these slides, is that benefit realisation. It's absolutely critical that we demonstrate the benefits and evidence to support the future business cases, whether we sit in housing, social care or health. If we're going to really deliver population health and improve people's lives, as Roy's talked about, we need to start communicating together. This service model starts to give you some of the examples of how we could do it. As we move on, I couldn't deliver this without looking at the TAPI principles, because they are truly aligned with the overarching personalised innovation programme of those preventative, proactive services in the community, and empowering, digital citizenship, overcoming digital inequalities, promoting digital co-design. But we need to look at improving digital standards for housing, invest in digital infrastructures, and enhancing digital skills and learning. But finally, back to that benefit realisation, we have to make the case. We have to test the TAPI principles that has digital rights as its core. I now truly believe that we're stronger together. We've heard on the call, we've heard from Vic, from a social care driver, but we are stronger together in housing and social care, and we're starting to see those partnerships coming together. But what we have is an overarching committed purpose. We've never had this before. 8 years ago, we didn't have a committed purpose. I was always knocking on the door of social care. Please listen to me. Well, now we have that common purpose. It's people. And the TAPI principles really endorse that. In our private lives, in our personal lives, technology allowed us to function as human beings and allowed us to deliver the valuable services we needed in the community. So now let's look at people, a really personal story. Now, let's meet Alf. This is what good looks like if we truly collaborate, deliver the key outcomes described in TAPI, and that's enabled by a technology-enabled care service. He's 96. He lives in a bungalow. This is his home. He suffers from poor eyesight. He's got poor hearing and dementia. He was recently discharged from hospital following a fall. Initially, he was given a 24-hour care package as the ward highlighted he was at risk. His daughter didn't live close to Alf, and she was insisting he moved into a care home. This is common of millions of families, of millions of support networks who really can't see the benefit that technology-enabled care can bring. But Alf was determined. This is Alf. He's his smiley face on there. He wanted the right care at the right time to keep him safe and mitigate risks. A digital lifestyle monitoring system was installed, and the data showed Alf could manage 24/7. So his package was reduced to 2 visits per day, plus proactive call monitoring was established. A fantastic outcome for Alf, remaining independently at home. His daughter's connected and reassured through digital means, and overall you see the financial savings. But you see how I say that last. We should always be driven from what does it mean to me, a professional in housing, a senior executive in housing, or their tenants, Alf. There are many stories and case studies, and we're going to hear some this afternoon, how we're supporting all our vulnerable people in our communities. But let's relook at that diagram again. It's critical that new housing models, that we ensure that they co-produce and that we start to build those strong foundations, the enablers, those tools, those blueprints that we can lift and shift. And when the money comes from our government to truly embrace new models of care and housing, we'll be ready. We'll be ready with enablers across the whole of the UK to really embrace that journey. So what's next? We've heard today about the Department of Health, and it's hot off the press. It truly is. It was published last week, and I was honoured to be part of that 10-year vision. I was fortunate to have a voice. But my voice in those 8 weeks took us from a purely focusing on care homes and care records to really embracing and shaping and influencing that charging reform. What's incredible is people are at the heart of this work. People have a choice and support to live independent lives. They do, and they should. People can access outstanding quality and tailored care and support. And people find adult social care, housing and other services accessible and fair. Investments being made to help people live independently. And as we heard from Sue, I applaud the housing and technology grant that's going to be coming our way. But the vision and key drivers resonate with all the work over the 18 months and all of that work that I've talked about. We'll share some of our insights reports and the reports which complement our TAPI model. These are the whats and the whys, but there's an urgent need for government to really think about a strong implementation planning, a personalised innovation care model, and the integration white paper is due. system integration, but what's really incredible about the integration agenda is the place-based integration, what we're talking about today. How can we connect communities with housing to deliver new models of care, a vision of personalisation? We're all committed to building back better. None of us want to go back to the days of siloed services. We want to create the right care, the right place and the right time. And as I have lived experience as a carer myself, and right in the middle of this work, I was asked, what's your experience, Alison, as my dad had continuing healthcare at the end of his life? And I described it as broken. And that was because there was no connected community care available to dad. The TAPI principles gives us strong foundations to build upon and create. I would like to see in the TAPI next phases of work a true blueprint for housing, gift our housing colleagues nationally with the tools, the guidance, the empowerment and the culture to make this happen. I look forward to working with Dunhill, TAPI, HousingLIN, all of the colleagues that come together in this incredible journey. And I can't wait for the next phase to start. Thank you.
Oh, thanks very much, Alison. Nearly gave the next steps away there. We're going to be coming back to talk about those briefly at the end, but I do want to move on quickly now because we're going to be hearing from some people who are on the front line of providing care and support in housing contexts. Firstly, we've got Angus Honeysett, who's the head of market access at Tunstall Healthcare. Angus is a service design and development specialist. In his current role as head of market access at Tunstall, he uses his knowledge and experience to drive cultural change in health, housing and social care organisations. So he'll be hopefully able to pick up a couple of the questions that we've got coming in at the moment, and we'll come back to those afterwards. But effectively, he wants to do this with the underlying principle of delivering better service for everybody. So over to you, Angus.
Thanks, Sue, very much. And I think if you can address all your questions to the other panelists, that would be hugely appreciated. I jest, delighted to answer your questions. But I guess the first question from me that often gets asked is, what on earth is market access? So just to sort of put out there, it's about, in its simplest definition, using evidence, data and information to access the right things at the right time for citizens across housing, health and social care. And there are many things affecting housing, health and social care, and a lot of the things I'm going to cover align with the TAPI principles that everybody has already talked about. But I think it's also really important to take the information from reports and papers and actually think about the delivery. How is this going to be realised in practice? And I'm actually going to share my presentation as well, so just bear with me a second. There we go. I do apologise. So firstly, the importance of integrating health and social care with housing as a driver and the need to get on with it. Simply, we've got to do it rather than continuing to talk about it. Working together is in everyone's interests, with the key word being integrated. A large part of the population have both health and care needs, and it makes sense to join them up, saving the taxpayer money. That leads on to shared common goals. It's about population health, housing and social care working together to put the citizen at the heart of decisions made about them and their care. Of course, housing, health and social care are dependent on each other. If we don't do a good job of care, citizens will need the health system, and if we don't keep citizens well, it has an impact on housing. We need to have a truly joined up approach, an integrated approach. Most importantly, we need to listen to citizens, understand their everyday needs and work together to bridge gaps, whether that be in housing, social care or health. This slide demonstrates there are significant benefits realised from these and other initiatives. The point I want to make is that when we get it right for the citizen, the benefits flow through the system to primary, secondary, and community and social care, and ultimately housing. Citizens stay in the place of their choice for longer, preventing the entry into care, residential or otherwise. And I noticed a comment from Shirley Ayres earlier on, which I think was absolutely on point. So if we get things right and citizen outcomes are improved, it has a direct positive impact on care and delivering cost efficiencies. Improved condition management and medication compliance has a clear impact on decreasing GP visits. Clinicians are able to target patients that need support, and early intervention can prevent often high-cost care intervention. Using technology to support people at home is low cost, means citizens can stay at home for longer and increases quality of life. Likewise, relatively low-cost telecare systems can help avoid hospital admissions, delay and prevent the need for residential care, and reduce carer burnout. It's about working in partnership with housing, local authorities and commissioners, understanding what is required and adapting as things change, not to be driven by contracts, but in providing solutions. We need to go back a stage before solution building. If we understand what the problems are, we can help co-design the solution. It's a bit of, don't tell us the solution you want, tell us the problem you have, and let's come up with the best solution together. But it's difficult. Technology has historically been seen as a barrier. Cultural change is required, which in turn needs early engagement. We must lead from the top to ensure stakeholders have input at an early stage into how tech can help them and the citizens they support. There is still fear that needs to be addressed. Stakeholders need to know tech is an enabler to help them, not replace them. Of course, there is a crisis due to an aging population. Between now and 2040, there will be an extra 6 million over 65s. People on this call will be putting in place things that will enhance people's care for longer, but we need to add technology to people's lives to assist them with them keeping them out of the care system. There are other challenges too, with the move from the analog to digital services being one that's gathering pace and concern. However, this brings a once in a generation opportunity to modernise, improve and shift the sector and the thinking from a reactive to a proactive delivery model, enhancing outcomes for citizens, improving efficiencies and redesigning services around the user. AI, machine learning and the use of data is hugely important to this, but we need to educate people to understand the value of data. People getting value in return for providing their data and enabling digital solutions to help us be more creative. Digital telecare in particular can improve citizen experience, support, improve quality, reliability, and provide enhanced services which are tailored to meet specific needs. These improvements could include faster call connection speeds, better audio quality, increased resilience and reliability, the ability to self-install devices, and the potential to link consumer technology such as wearables, mobile phones, and other smart devices to alarm receiving centres. But rather than me talking to you about this from a supplier perspective, I'm going to ask a few questions to Steve Rawson, who is the Chief Operating Officer at Beyond Housing, about how they are approaching the journey. So good afternoon, Steve.
Hi, Angus. Hello, everybody.
Great to see you this afternoon, and thanks very much for joining us. So I guess my first question to you, Steve, is what does the digital journey mean to you and your organisation?
Well, I'm going to split that into what does it mean to me and what does it mean to my organisation. So in terms of me, I had a very eye-opening time a few weeks ago when I went round to see my mum and dad. I always go around on a Monday night and went in to see them. And before lockdown hit, neither one of them had really used technology in terms of how it's worked. You know, in isolation, you know, we got them all linked up and we're doing Zoom calls and everything else. And I walked into the house to see my mum and dad, who were both in their 80s, arguing about what was the best technology, either a laptop or an iPad, because my mum uses a laptop, my dad uses an iPad, and they were very much into a very strong argument about which was the best. And it was a bit of an eye-opener for me in terms of that you shouldn't underestimate people in terms of their ability to use technology. And now it's gone from every time I walked in, them asking me how to do things on technology, to when I'm trying to do something on technology, them explaining to me how I'm doing it wrong, how much there are easier ways of doing it. And the second piece was, I had one of those moments in a meeting the other day. I've been in housing for 30 years now, and I've spent a lot of that time talking about older people's housing, elderly people's housing, over 55s housing. And I suddenly had the realization in a meeting that when I'm talking about over 55s housing, that's now me. And I'm now in that category in terms of over 55s housing, which was a very much an eye-opener. In terms of the organisation, I'm Chief Operations Officer at Beyond Housing. I joined the organisation 2 weeks before the first lockdown. So it's been an interesting time since I've joined the organisation. And it's been a very full-on time for the organisation. The organisation came from a merger. If you'd like to put the slide on, Angus, please. So that's just a bit of a summary of Beyond Housing, where we are, and our reach and response service, which I'll talk to a bit about later on. So I won't go through all the details. That's who we are, where we are, and what happened to us. But we had 3 legacy services providing telecare when I joined the organisation, with an ambition to bring them together as one service under one brand. To do that, one of the biggest challenges we had was how to get this through the board, how to get a business plan put together, how to give the board some kind of reassurance about the future for the service, about bringing it together, and the fact that we had to be fully digitised and compliant by 2025, which we estimated would take about a £1.3 million investment. Now, we're not a small organisation, but we're not a huge organisation, and a £1.3 million investment is significant for us. So we really looked at what we wanted to be, where we wanted to go, what we wanted to do as an organisation. We looked at the technology, but mainly we looked at the people, which fits in with a lot of the things we've heard. We have fantastic people who work for us in those services, incredibly passionate, incredibly committed, and held back, to be honest, by the technology they'd been using in the past. I'm sure that all the people there run similar services or use similar, know how great the people are. They're in those jobs because they're passionate, they're committed, they want the best for their customers, they want the best for the people they use. So making sure we listen to people, they were involved in the future and going forward. We were looking at future technology, how we could deliver future technology gains, what productivity that could deliver for us, and how we could really move the services on to the next level in terms of personalisation, in terms of looking at where we want to be in the future and how we can tailor what we want to do. And the discussions with the board, we've approved a new strategy, a 5-year strategy for the service. I've got the £1.3 million in the business plan going forward, but don't say that too loudly when Tunstall are around us. They want us to spend it with them in terms of where we are. And that's really been the digital journey for us over the last period.
That's great, and noted about the 1.3 million. Thank you, Steve. So could you tell us about some of the challenges you're facing sort of at the moment?
Yeah, the challenges really has been on the digitisation. Is it 2025? Isn't it 2025? Is it going to be earlier? Is it going to be later? Well, we've made the decision we will be digitised by 2025 or earlier if the legislation goes that way. Big challenge around the future, really. In a world where things aren't certain, how do you get that certainty for people to know they've got a job in the future, to know how secure they are, to harness their talents going forward, and to give the board and the exec team the reassurance that this is a service for the long term going forward. We've got a clear strategy and a clear plan, and the Reach and Respond service is absolutely integral to our strategy in terms of where we want to be. It's one of those things that seems to get forgotten, but there's a real business case to our core housing management services in this. Our biggest thing, our most valuable thing we have in the organisation, who are our tenants who are in long-term tenancies, who pay their rent every week, who don't cause any problems, don't make big demands on the service. And every 3 years, we can increase the length of tenancy, puts about £300,000 into our bottom line in terms of reduced turnover. So there's a real business case for keeping people in their homes longer in terms of the way we go. I think one of the big things is this is a once in an era, opportunity for us. We've got to get it right in terms of the investment we make and in terms of the benefits we can make going forward. I think the experience we've all had through COVID, where you join an organisation and 14 days later you've got 3 days to get everybody working from home, was an experience we'll never experience in our lives again. But it showed it could be done. It showed that actually we can do things quickly. We can do things at pace. We don't need to plan things for 9 months, and with project plans and risk assessments coming out of our ears. Sometimes it's better just to get on and do and deliver. And I suppose the other big is the technology. Are we going to have transferable data? Are we going to have protocols in place that means we can move sorry, Angus, but we can move between suppliers more quickly in terms of what we do? Are we making decisions now that are going to be shown to be not the right decisions in 6 months' time, and when you're investing lots of money in terms of it? So those are the real challenges that I think we're facing at the moment.
Okay, thanks for that, Steve. And we've heard from Roy and Alison in particular about the 10 TAPI principles. And I just wonder how these are relevant to Beyond Housing and how you can apply them in practice.
I think they're absolutely fantastic set of principles. I think they cover every facet of the challenges that we're facing. And when you look at the principles, I don't think they just apply in this area, they apply to most organisations. And I think most organisations who look at themselves would recognise the values and principles, particularly in the housing sector, that sit within those principles. I could go through all of them and sort of wax lyrical, but I've chosen to pick one, which is really pertinent, I think, and that's the co-production as a really profound, really principle. It's very real and pertinent to housing organisations at the moment in terms of the co-production. And it ties, everybody talks about the Adult Social Care White Paper, but it really ties into the Housing White Paper as well in terms of how we involve customers, how we can tailor our services to customers, and how we can future-proof our services. For a long time, I've been in the sector a long time, worked with a lot of organisations and worked with a lot of organisations that talk about having customers at the heart of everything we do, and have trumpeted their involvement of customers. What this has tended to mean over the years, that there's a very small group of very dedicated, very committed and very knowledgeable customers that come from a very narrow demographic who give their views, policies amended to take them on board, and everybody ticks the boxes and say, oh, we've got our involved customers involved, we've done our customer consultation, everything's great, everything's happy. That's not good enough for the Housing White Paper, it's not good enough for the sector, and technology gives us a real opportunity to do things differently. Since I've been at Beyond, we've introduced a new engagement approach, which really is based on consultation with customers, dependent upon what is being discussed. So it could be based on demographics, it could be on service use, it could be on common interests, it could be on geography, or a combination of all. Technology really gives the ability to bring more people into that discussion around how services can be designed and developed. Two examples really. The first, I think the one most profound, is the rebranding exercise of Reach and Respond, which is where I called it a rebranding, but it was really the integration of three similar but different services into one. We involved literally thousands of our customers in terms of the discussion around what they wanted to see from the service, what was important about the service, what they valued from the service. And it really fits into a lot of the things that we've heard about before. It gave some really strong views and guidance. People said the technology, they didn't want it in their face. They didn't want to be able, it had to be there, it had to be reliable, it had to deliver benefits, and it had to be there to deliver support to them. But they didn't want technology that was in their face. They didn't want it all singing and dancing, but it had to be able to offer them benefits. What they really valued was the interaction they had with our people, and the impact that our people had on their lives. The responder service, the reach, and what they talked about was they wanted to be able to trust us when they reached out to us. They wanted to be able to trust us when we reached out to them, and know that we would respond and we would be part of that response, would deliver a benefit to them and help them and support them. And that idea, we involved our customers, we involved our colleagues, we involved carers, we involved social workers, we involved families and friends of our customers in terms of that design, and what we wanted that service to be. And I think we've come up with a brand that meets all the requirements that we want. We did go, some of the suggestions were a bit wild and wacky at times, and we sort of like the wilder and wacky ones sort of got dropped out, and we went ones that people could trust, and it was that real trust factor that came from it. The second example is we've just done a major piece of research about our customer contact approach and how our customers want to be contacted and how we want to contact them. And the results were quite enlightening, really, very similar to the Reach and Respond research. They didn't want bells and whistles and fancy systems. They wanted effective solutions in two scenarios. The first was, when we want to know something, we want to be able to access that when we want to access it in the way that we want to access it, when it's just about getting information. When we want to do something, it's about, we want to get to the person who can deliver that result as quickly as they possibly can. And the technology doesn't matter. What we want is an outcome in terms of how we can deliver. And the most surprising fact that came out of it, I remember, it was about the percentage of our customers who are digitally enabled, if you like, have internet access in their home. I remember doing this 15 years ago, and it would have been about 30%, and people at the time told us there's no point investing in digital technology for your tenants because they'll never have access to it. I remember doing something 5 or 6 years ago when it was 63%. This research shows that 93% of our customers have access to the internet, which gives us real opportunities to develop services, to be able to personalize, customize what we do around them. So I said I could wax lyrical on them all, but I'll stick to that one at the moment, Angus.
That's excellent, thanks, Steve. And I think it sort of fits very much with. I'm a very big advocate of the sort of the citizen versus the system, and it's all about getting it right for the citizen, whether they're in a housing, social care, or health environment. So you've given a great overview of the amazing work that Beyond have been doing. What do you think great could look like in the future?
Well, I'm going to apologise to everybody for what I'm going to do next, but there's a few people who know me in the audience know I couldn't get anything doing this straight, so I apologise to Angus. I apologise to our eminent panel in terms of where we are, and I can see just by the look on Angus's face that he's nervous at the moment. But when I was looking at what great could look like, when I wrote the list down and what it was about, it turned into a bit of a wish list in terms of it. And in terms of a wish list at this time of year, it felt like a bit of a happy tappy Christmas. So I've redone this bit as the 5 days of the happy tappy Christmas. So I apologise now, but I'm on a roll now, so I'm going to continue. So you'll get the theme going through very quickly. So on the first day of the happy tappy Christmas, my stakeholders said to me, Steve, we fully recognise the value of housing organisations bring to the table, not because we've got to, not because they're an afterthought, or because actually you've got a bit of cash stuffed down the back of the sofa that we might be able to access, but we want you sat around the table on a permanent basis as a valued and equal partner. On the second day of the happy tappy Christmas, my stakeholder said to me, Steve, we don't need any more pilots. We don't need to do any more research. Actually, we've got bags of data. We've got data coming out of our ears. So let's use it to start making plans and delivering services to improve the quality of lives of the people that we all serve. On the third day of Happy Tappy Christmas, my stakeholder said to me, here's all the IT protocols, all agreed. You need to make the investment decisions required to deliver services to our customers in the future. On the fourth day of the Happy Tappy Christmas, my stakeholder said to me, we've carried out a range of training and information to all our staff who are involved in developing care packages and delivery care, so they know all the technological solutions there, they know where to go to get them, they know how to access them. We've sorted out all the procurement issues, so when somebody identifies a need, we can just get the right people in to provide that support quickly, simply and straightforwardly. And then finally, on the fifth day of the Happy Tappy Christmas, it's not 5 gold rings, it's 1 golden thread, based on the Tappy principles that links us all together, whichever organisation we're in, to our customers, and enables us to really move into prevention rather than reaction together in one way. So I actually can't believe I'm going to do this. So I'm going to go through this now. So on the 5th day of the Happy Tappy Christmas, my stakeholders gave to me 1 golden thread, an informed workforce, a set of IT protocols, a no to any more pilots, and a place around the table where I'll always be. So that's the end.
Brilliant. Thanks, Steve. I'm not entirely sure how to follow that, but I'm going to try. So if I could just summarize sort of the key messages from your presentation. Firstly, digital needs to be done, but you need the right solution at the right time. Secondly, it's about people. We need to take people on the journey with us, whether that's your staff or those in health and social care. It's about working together for our citizens, real people, practical application. And thirdly, the brand. Digital can deliver cost benefits and improve brand and marketability, and we need to make the most of that. And I think, to steal your phrase, thank you very much for listening, and a very happy tappy Christmas to you all.
No, I'm just sorry that that wasn't set to music. Thanks, Steve. It's fabulous. No, and really, thank you.
You may be able to do that, Sue.
Yeah. Well, oh, now you're talking, Jeremy. No, Roy. Yeah. Well, you're not suggesting that we're all going to perform it, because we're leaving that to Steve. I think he did a great solo.
I've got an equity card.
Oh, I think I just want to say thank you to all of the panel. I think that was such a great set of talks, and I think there's been lots to think about. Just a couple of questions coming in from those who are with us this afternoon, and they're really about well, one of them certainly is about culture and how we influence real cultural change, particularly amongst people who are still really quite hesitant about using technology, and really don't see the value, or think it's all too difficult and confusing for them. And I just wondered whether anyone's got any thoughts about what we might have to do to encourage more people to see the benefits.
So can I pick that one up to start with?
Yeah, sure. Please do, Angus.
I think there's an awful lot to do with co-production, working together, and I referred in the presentation I gave to we need to understand the problems, we need to understand the challenges that are faced by housing, social care and health teams on a day-to-day basis. And we heard an awful lot about sort of collaboration and working together to come up with the best and effective solutions. And I think that's about working with Jeremy and the HousingLIN team and Alison at the TSA and across organisations. So with Steve and your teams, but also with local authorities, ICSs that Vic referred to earlier on, in order to come up with the best solution to drive that cultural change as well. And making sure that commissioners understand the benefits of technology. If you look at the white paper that came out, it's chapter 4 talks all about technology as being here to stay and how we use that effectively to drive change, and cultural change being central to that. It's about the people. It talks about £500 million being about embedding digital skills into the workforce. And I think that we need to take that rhetoric and drive it forwards as advocates of cultural-based solutions.
Yeah, thanks, Angus. Sorry, I think you wanted to come in there, Roy.
Yeah, just to say something I'll put into the chat, maybe two things. First of all, it is a challenge. Cultural change is never easy, but if we can tell great stories and make them feel as if they're relevant to individuals, then that often really does make cultural change happen quickly. It's amazing how stories catalyze change. I think the second thing in that context is, so there's an argument, by the way, and it's not easy for me to say this, but there's an argument that you need great marketers engaged in this area because they tell great stories. They really do. Secondly, however, great designers need to be involved as well, because if we can design for people to feel as if things are not special because they're old, but special because they're great, that makes a difference. And finally, and I'm going to steal this from Claire on the chat, she mentioned that little things might make a big difference. And in fact, in my experience, and it is a long experience of dealing with people, if we can give them little things that delight them, then that gets them into big things that might delight them even more later. Yeah. So I just make that point. And by the way, little things that delight people are often not very expensive things. So it sort of kills two birds with one stone. So storytellers, designers, and little things that delight. Yeah. Thanks, Sue.
No, thanks, Roy. I'm absolutely with you on the storytelling and the need for great marketing, actually, and it's so often forgotten, and particularly around technology. Alison, you wanted to add something there.
I think I'd just like to add what Roy's just said there, and I just want to give a personal story. So we talked about my dad, mixed vascular dementia, didn't present himself with the mixed Parkinson's, didn't see himself as declining, but he was. When we realised how poorly he really was, where did we start? We started about talking to him. We started about, what do you want, Dad? What is it you want in your life? And he gives lots of things. Then we tailored the technology around it. When we've done real cultural change out there with our workforce and our people, it's always about what's in it for them. They want to deliver good outcomes. And as we talk to carers, as they were delivering services on a palliative support, what do you want not enabled by technology, but what will make your life easier to deliver better outcomes for my dad? And that's how you empower them to deliver different things. We need training that empowers people to culturally think about the greater good, not about the system need. They know that. They know about risk. They know about assessment. What they don't know is about they can enable those outcomes differently by using technology, and they can deliver more. So we've done some great training in Manchester and others, but it's never about the pieces of kit. It's about what that will give them.
What it will do.
We've started to design some really, really smart technology solutions for training a virtual house, using gaming technologies to really empower people. We just need to, that storytelling is important, but show them the examples of how it's going to change. It's the times now.
Well, it's the old marketers, it's the sizzle, not the sausage, isn't it?
It absolutely is. And we can do it. They're there. People are ready to listen.
Yeah.
For a long, long time they haven't been, because we have the historic things. You're taking my job away. No, people just want to see how they can do their job better and deliver better outcomes for the people that they serve. They're so stretched, housing colleagues, social care colleagues. They need everything that Tappy says we're going to do, or hopefully do.
Absolutely. Thanks, Alison. And just one final question for the panel, just because this came in on the Q&A board. So Michelle at 13 Group says, communication, integration, information sharing and personalised services, preventative care have been, you know, on everybody's lips for about at every event for the last 25 years. What do the panel think needs to happen at a national level to actually make this happen? Does anyone want to try and address that one? I mean, I think Roy touched on a little bit earlier that there's something that we can all do. It's not just about top down, but is there something that's sort of left at national level that really needs to happen? Oh,
Well, shall I jump in, Sue?
Go on, Jeremy.
I think national is important. I actually think what happens locally and within neighbourhoods is probably even more important, because that's where the outcomes are going to actually be delivered. But what we need clearly is, how do we set out the coherent framework where digital echoes the digital citizenship that Angus and others mentioned, addresses the inequalities that Roy touched on, and can deliver better inclusive ways for those communities to really effectively engage, so that Steve's mum or dad can choose an Apple or a Microsoft, but make sure that it is interoperable and they can still communicate. So it's about the digital connectedness supporting the social connectedness.
Yeah, no, I would agree with that. Angus.
Yeah, I absolutely support that, Jeremy. But the other thing I think as well is that the government have been talking about social care reform for a very, very long time. And you could argue, I mean, when the report came out in February from Hancock, it talked about social care being delivered later in the year, and the white paper being delivered, which it now duly has been. So everybody is aware of it. Everybody knows things need to change, but now is the time to change. And Alison, you talked and touched on the TSA and ADAS Commission earlier on, which involved housing colleagues and senior representatives in the industry. And for me, it's about following through on those recommendations. Many on the call will often hear me talk about, it's not just about a series of recommendations sitting on a shelf getting dusty. It's about how do we now actually do something with it in order to move forward, because we're almost, well, it's too late. We've got to do something, and now is the time to do that. And the sort of the shift into this digital age in the technology world is absolutely the time to move on that.
Yeah, I think there's a burning platform now for sure. And I think, as somebody said in the chat, who were watching the Dimbleby lecture last night, I think Sarah Gilbert said it's not the last pandemic we'll see, so we better get on and sort ourselves out and make sure we're prepared for the next one. Steve.
Yeah, I think I agree with everything that Angus has said, but I think there's one other imperative at the moment in terms that will drive this forward, is that we won't be able to recruit the people to not be able to do with technology. In virtually every sector, we're struggling to recruit. The people just aren't there to actually so we're going to have to use technology, and I think that will be a driver for a lot of commissioners, for a lot of agencies, in terms of, well, actually there aren't the people to fill the gaps, so therefore we've got to do something different. We've got to use the technology, and we're not looking to do anything radical or revolutionary. We've been talking about this, I've been talking about this for a very, very long time. But I think there's so many imperatives now that make it an absolute must, and it's got to happen. And I think the recruitment and the inability to recruit people, and the need to upskill the people we've got and reward the people at a lot that we've got at a level which means we retain them, means that we're going to have to look for technological solutions, because it will be the only alternative that's out there.
Yeah, sure. Roy, did you just want to come back?
Just very briefly. It's a great question. What could be done nationally? And I did put something in the chat box. But I think that if I was in a position of power, then I would be establishing a national independent living strategy in order to try to ensure that we communicated as a government, as a bunch of leaders, to people that independent living was something that they could strive for and that we would support right through their lives, by the way, because dependency is not what anybody wants. I don't want it. My mother doesn't want it. I think that would be important, and I think it's a gap. Then I think that government can do a couple of other things, and they're relatively light touch. One of them is that they can convene on best practice. And the second thing is they can incentivize replication of best practice. These are not rocket science, but they just don't seem to always get them.
No.
Thanks.
Great point. Alison, briefly, 30 seconds. We need to wind this up.
In the mutus. Okay, so Roy's given it a real head goer for nationally, but we talked there, and in my presentation I said no point to us having a white paper if we can't implement. So let's get an innovation program funded in social care, which then enables housing, which will really drive this. Do a blueprint, lift it and shift it and share it a lot. Share it a lot. If the government invest in a proper transformation in social care, housing will benefit, but also will help. A vanguard, as we used to call them, but it's needed now. It's needed now. And if we get that, we'll start to see the transformation, as Roy's described, about that independent living strategy. Oh my goodness, have we got that? We will all benefit. We will all benefit. So National needs to do the blueprint and share it lots. Those 10 enablers that I've described in that diagram are relevant, and it'll help all of the communities out there to start delivering this change that's needed.
Fantastic. And I think that's a really, really good wind up to the session. I think we've addressed the questions that came in. There's been some fantastic stuff going on in the chat box, which I think we need to try and capture and pick up, and I know we'll do that. I'm just going to grab chair's privilege and just for 5 minutes at the end, because I want to make an announcement about the next steps for TAPI. I also want to make a couple of thank yous, which I'm a bit remiss for not having done already. One is to thank Tunstall for sponsoring this session, so thanks very much. Thanks, Angus. The other is to Lois Beach from HousingLIN, who was the co-author of the TAPI report and provided and led on the secretariat function. She did such a fantastic job because it was such a wide-ranging inquiry with so much to bring together, and to bring together such a really great, coherent and engaging report, I think was a super job. So thanks, Lois. So with those thanks, I just, as I said, wanted to exercise chair's privilege for a couple of minutes to return to the white paper, which, as I said earlier, commits to £150 million worth of additional funding over the next 3 years to unlock the potential of care tech innovation. The intention for the funding is to test ideas, scale those where there's proven benefit, and to build a case for change. But as we said earlier, there's no consistently understood or applied concept of what good looks like in tech-enabled support. And I'm sure we would all want to see that this additional funding gets spent well. HousingLIN's impressive work on the TAPI report has laid the foundations for us to be able to do that. So I'm delighted to be able to tell you that my own board has recently committed a fund of £1 million to support the development of a full TAPI framework. We're proposing to provide catalytic research and development funding to support organisations which might include local authorities, housing associations and providers, healthcare trusts, etc., who are already interested in the approach and will be receptive to testing the TAPI principles, together with those that are new to the concept but recognise its importance. We'd ideally want to get involved a mix of urban and rural settings, two-tier and unitary authorities, and organisations in both the third sector and the private sector who are both experienced and new to the concept of integrating technology with housing, health and social care. There'll be an open and inclusive and competitive application process, and the TSA and the HousingLIN will again be helping us to deliver the programme. We would hope that this would equip those participating to unlock access to the government's committed funding. I don't have the specifics yet, so please, I don't want the Q&A to light up just now. We're still very much working on the detail of that. It's very much hot off the press. This decision's only been made in the last couple of days. So do please follow us on Twitter, LinkedIn, or sign up to the website to receive updates. And I'm sure you'll be able to do the same with the TSA and HousingLIN. So I know we're all very excited about it on the panel. And there'll be more to follow. So with that, I'm going to end the session. I don't know whether there's anything just final that you want to say, Jeremy. And I just want to thank you all for attending, and I think this is the first time actually I've wished everybody a very happy Christmas.
Well, I'm surprised you didn't say happy tappy Christmas, Sue.
A happy tappy. Oh, I missed it. I missed it.
But,
an open goal. I missed it.
on behalf of the HousingLIN and our sponsors, can I also thank you for chairing it so eloquently, so succinctly, and also for the announcement, which is a fabulous sector news and a Christmas present for us to unwrap in the new year. Thanks, everybody.
Yeah, thanks everybody. Take care. See you all soon.
See ya.